He put his hand on my back and I didn't flinch. That's when I knew. My heart had already left, even if my body stayed. Let me ask you something. Have you ever woken up next to someone you used to love and felt more alone than if the bed was empty? If this hits something in you, take a second to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. You're not alone. We talk about the quiet stuff here, the stuff most people keep buried. I'm Joyce Holt. I've been married to Ryker McCann for 11 years, and if you asked our neighbors, they'd probably say we're doing great. Nice house, 2 kids, smiles at school drop-off. He brings me flowers on my birthday. I remember to grab his dry cleaning, the usual. But here's what no one sees. The silence that takes up more space in our home than any piece of furniture. The way I talk less, not because I have nothing to say, but because I've stopped expecting him to hear it. The nights he comes home late and heads straight for the shower, then his phone, then sleep. We didn't fight, we didn't scream, we just stopped looking at each other. And somehow, that felt worse. Ryker used to light up when I walked into a room. I remember the way he'd hold my face when we kissed, like it was something delicate. Sacred. Now, he scrolls while I talk, he nods, but he doesn't listen. Sometimes, I wonder if he even knows who I've become. I don't say any of this to make him the villain. Life got busy, work got hard, the kids needed us. We chose safety over sparks, and slowly we stopped reaching for each other. He gave all his energy to the world. And I was what was left when the day ran out. At first, I tried harder, woke up earlier, made the dinners he liked, asked how his meetings went. But after a while, I started shrinking. Not because he asked me to, but because I thought maybe if I took up less space, he'd have more room to miss me. Spoiler. He didn't. And I got really good at pretending. Pretending I was fine. Pretending this was normal. Pretending that all marriages just go quiet after a while. But deep down, I knew something was slipping. And I was too scared to say it out loud. Too scared to ask the question that might unravel everything. Do you even see me anymore? I didn't realize how starved I was for connection. Until the day Niko Gordon fixed our kitchen sink. The first time I met Niko Gordon, he was standing at my front door holding a toolbox and wearing a navy shirt with his name stitched above the pocket. He had kind eyes. Not in the fake, overly charming way some men do. Just soft. Curious. Like he actually looked at people when they talked. I'd called the plumbing company to fix a leak under the kitchen sink. I didn't think anything of it. Just another Tuesday. But when I opened the door and he glanced at the little planter by the porch, he smiled and said, "Those basil leaves are looking jealous of your rosemary." It caught me off guard. Not because it was charming, though it was, because I couldn't remember the last time someone noticed something I'd cared for. I laughed, said something awkward like, "Yeah, I talked to them. Don't judge me." And he grinned. I wouldn't dare. Looks like it's working. He got to work under the sink. Quiet but focused. I offered him water, then tea, then cookies. I didn't really plan to bake, but somehow I did. When he left, I went back to my day. But something small had shifted. A week later, I saw his van again. This time, he was doing work at the neighbors. He waved. I waved back. And for reasons I didn't explore yet, I stayed in the yard longer than I needed to. Over the next few weeks, he came by a few more times. The water heater needed checking. Then the bathroom upstairs had a pressure issue. Some of the calls were necessary, some, maybe not so much. But I didn't stop him, and he didn't rush the jobs. We started talking more. Nothing deep at first. Just life, books, music, how he hated iced coffee and how I couldn't survive without it. He told me about his divorce, how he'd gotten married young before they figured out who they were. There was no bitterness in his voice, just honesty. He wasn't trying to impress me, and that made me trust him. He never flirted, never made a move, but he was present. He listened, he laughed at my dry jokes, and once while I was refilling bird feeders in the backyard, he called out from the porch, "You always take care of things no one sees. That's rare." And something in me cracked a little, because Ryker never said stuff like that. Not anymore. He used to. But those days felt like someone else's memories. With Niko, I noticed myself noticing myself. I brushed my hair before he came, checked my breath, picked earrings I hadn't worn in years. And when he was around, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like an afterthought. I felt awake. One afternoon, we were sitting at the table after he'd finished adjusting a cabinet door in the pantry. I made us coffee. He looked around and said, "Did Ryker build these himself?" I laughed, too hard, too loud, and said before I could stop myself, "Ryker doesn't build things, he only tears them down." I saw the look on Niko's face, surprise, then sadness, then a sort of quiet understanding. He didn't ask any questions after that. He just looked at me like he already knew the answers. And somehow that was worse than if he'd said a word. The first real lie I told wasn't with my mouth, it was with my thumb. Niko had sent me a text late one night. Just a song, a YouTube link and a few words. "Thought of you when I heard this." It wasn't a love song. Nothing dramatic, just something soft, reflective. The kind of song you play when you're driving alone at night, windows down, wondering how you got here. I stared at that text for way too long. Then I deleted it. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to explain why it mattered. And that was the moment I knew. I had something to hide. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I wanted to. Ryker didn't notice I'd gone quiet. He didn't ask why I kept glancing at my phone during dinner. He was too busy planning a conference trip to Austin with Taylor Kelly, his assistant. They were going to present something to a board of investors. I nodded when he told me. Smiled when he said they'd have to stay 2 nights. And I didn't ask a single question. Later that evening, I was folding his laundry. That's when I found it. A faint smudge of lipstick on the collar of his white button-down. A shade that wasn't mine. I held it in my hand like a riddle. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel rage. I felt something closer to relief. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. If he was slipping away too, maybe I wasn't the only one failing. I put the shirt back in the basket, folded it neatly, said nothing. That night, Ryker slept in the guest room again. Said his back was stiff. I said okay. He didn't kiss me goodnight. The next morning, I made pancakes for the kids and coffee for him. Routine. Perfection. We moved like a well-rehearsed performance. Later that week, Niko came by to finish some work on the attic fan. He climbed the ladder while I held the base, watching the way his arms flexed as he adjusted the wiring. At one point, the ladder wobbled just slightly, and he reached down to steady himself, his hand landing gently on my shoulder. And here's what I wish I could say. That I stepped away, that I flinched, that I remembered the boundaries I said I'd never cross, but I didn't. I stood still, let him touch me. When Niko touched my shoulder to steady the ladder, I didn't flinch, I leaned in. It was raining the night Niko came back. The kind of rain that taps against the windows like it's asking to be let in. Ryker was out of town, conference in Austin with Taylor Kelly. The kids were at my mom's for the weekend. The house felt too quiet. Too still. I had just finished wiping down the counters when the doorbell rang. There he was. Soaked, holding a book we'd talked about weeks earlier. The Night Circus. I'd loaned it to him without thinking much of it. Now, he was returning it. Like that small gesture was still important. "Didn't want to keep it too long," he said with a shy grin. "I know how people get about their favorite books." I smiled. "Want to come in for a minute? You're dripping." He followed me to the garage instead of the kitchen. I don't know why. Maybe because the garage felt less intimate, less like a choice. We stood by the old workbench. A single bulb buzzed overhead. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rolled low in the distance. And then, silence between us. I handed him a towel. He dried off, then leaned back against the bench, turning the book in his hands. "This one hit me harder than I thought," he said. I nodded. "It's about magic disguised as coincidence. You don't see it until it's already working on you." He looked at me for a long second. "Yeah, I guess it is." I don't remember who spoke next. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was just tired of pretending. I said something small at first, about how quiet the house had gotten. Then bigger things, about how Ryker had been gone long before this business trip. About how I couldn't remember the last time someone looked at me and actually saw me. I didn't cry, but I felt hollow in that moment, like I'd said too much and not enough all at once. That's when Niko said it. Not in a rush, not trying to seduce me, just gently, carefully. Like it hurt him to say it, but it hurt more to stay silent. "You know you're still beautiful, right? I don't say that to complicate things. I say it because I can see you're forgetting it." And something inside me broke, not the way a plate shatters on a kitchen floor. loud and messy. No, this was quieter, like a thread pulling loose in a sweater, unraveling everything underneath. I looked away. I didn't want him to see my eyes, because if he did, he'd know the truth. He'd know I almost wished he would kiss me, just so I could remember what it felt like to be wanted. But he didn't. He didn't touch me. He didn't move. He just stood there. Let the rain fill the silence. That night, I crawled into bed beside Ryker. And for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The lipstick wouldn't leave my mind. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe a colleague hugged him. Maybe a dry cleaner's mistake. But you don't accidentally get a full lipstick smear on a collar. Not in that color. Not in that spot. So when Ryker got back from his trip, I waited. I let him unpack. Let him talk about how the pitch went. Let him sit at the table and scroll through emails while eating the dinner. I reheated for the third time. Then, quietly, I asked, "Who is she?" He didn't even flinch, didn't pretend he didn't know what I meant. He just looked up, closed his laptop, and said, "You don't want to do this right now." "No," I said, "I need to." The silence between us stretched, tightened. Finally, he ran a hand down his face and exhaled like he'd been holding the truth in his lungs for too long. "Taylor," he said, "it's not new." I blinked, felt my stomach twist. Not at her name, but at the way he said it. Like he'd been carrying it around, waiting for someone to notice. "It didn't mean anything," he added quickly. "I just needed someone to remind me I mattered." And that's what broke me. Not the affair, not the lie, not even the fact that I'd been right. It was that line. Someone to remind me I mattered. Because I understood it too well. I sat back in the chair, my arms crossed tight like they were trying to hold my insides together. "That's what I've been begging you for," I whispered. Silently, for years. And just like that, the anger faded. Not because I forgave him, but because I finally saw him. Not as the man who hurt me, but as the man who had also let himself go numb. We were two people who stopped reaching for each other. Who let the silence win. He didn't say much after that. Didn't beg or plead or spin a story. Just said, "I'll give you space." And he left that night. A bag, a charger, his silence trailing behind him. Ryker left the house for a few nights. Niko brought over dinner. I didn't stop him. Niko brought over dinner 2 nights after Ryker left. Nothing fancy. Grilled chicken, roasted potatoes, brownies, but it was warm, thoughtful, not rushed. He didn't say much. Neither did I. We just sat at the table in a house that finally felt honest, even in its sadness. After the dishes were rinsed and stacked, I walked him to the door. It was raining again. Of course it was. We stood there under the porch light like we'd done 100 times before. But this time, it felt different. Not because something had changed, but because we'd stopped pretending it hadn't. I stepped closer, not to ask for anything, not to imply something. Just because I needed to be seen. Really seen. One last time. He looked at me like I was breakable and brave all at once. Then slowly, without a single word, he reached up and touched my cheek. His hand was warm, steady, and I didn't move away. We kissed. But it wasn't lust, it wasn't chaos. It felt more like grief. Grief for the years I'd spent disappearing. For the silence that filled a home that used to have music. When it ended, I laid my forehead against his chest, and I cried. Not because of guilt, but because I remembered what it felt like to feel held. And he didn't ask why. He just wrapped his arms around me and let me fall apart. That night, I didn't sleep much. The house was too quiet. My heart too loud. But when I finally woke in the early morning, the guest room door was closed behind me, and there on the nightstand was a note. "You don't owe me anything, but you owe yourself everything." I stared at those words for what felt like hours. I didn't text him, didn't call. Instead, I pulled out my old journal from the back of the closet, blew the dust off the cover, and started writing like I used to, before kids, before marriage, before I learned how to bury my needs for the sake of someone else's comfort. I wrote about the girl I used to be, the woman I became, and the version of me I was still afraid to meet. Sometimes, the first betrayal isn't an affair. It's the moment you stop looking each other in the eyes. It's been 5 months. Ryker and I are in therapy now, once a week. Same gray office, same tired leather couch. We talk more than we used to, but only because someone's in the room keeping score. It's not healing yet, it's sorting. Sometimes I wonder if we're doing this to fix our marriage, or just to understand why it broke. Ryker tries. He's softer now. He asks more questions, but something in me has shifted, not away from him exactly, just back toward me. Niko moved out of state. He didn't leave a dramatic goodbye. No long letter, no big moment, just a message that said, "Thank you for letting me be a mirror when you needed one." We don't keep in touch. And strangely, that feels okay, because what he gave me wasn't a future, it was a flashlight. Something to help me find the parts of myself I'd buried under obligation and routine. I work part-time now at the community center. It's nothing glamorous, mostly paperwork and mentoring teen girls after school. But I feel useful again, present. I smile more, not because everything's perfect, but because I've stopped waiting for someone else to validate my existence. And Ryker, I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. We still live in the same house, for now. But the way I move through it feels different. Lighter. I don't pretend anymore. He put his hand on my back. I didn't flinch, because now I no longer carry shame, I carry truth. Have you ever stayed too long in something that slowly erased you? Drop a ta in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. We talk about the parts no one admits.